If you stare too long into the abyss will stare back at you. Friedrich Nietzsche. Have you ever had that feeling? You're walking down the aisle and you cross over a bridge. You stop to look over the railings, admiring the bird's eye view, when suddenly something sinister happens. Maybe a silent cry of desolation. What if I jumped? You think to yourself before taking hold of your senses. The rational part of your brain that knows about things like logic, distance, and gravity would have known that there was no possible way you could jump from that bridge and survive. As you withdraw from the ledge, the urge that came out of nowhere has disappeared as swiftly as it arrived. It's a feeling more people have had than they'd like to admit. Most people ignore it, but not everyone does. The French have a phrase for it: l'appel du vide, the call of the void. A sudden pull of something beyond life, perhaps even death itself. It's that feeling when you stand in a high place and think about jumping, but don't actually want to and don't actually do it. What are some common examples? The phenomenon commonly manifests when you are confronted with a potentially life-threatening situation or a high risk of danger. For example, call of the void can involve thoughts or urges to jerk the steering wheel and turn into oncoming traffic while driving, jump into very deep water from a boat or bridge, stand on train or subway tracks, or jump in front of a train, cut yourself when holding a knife or other sharp objects, put a metal object into an electrical outlet, or stick your finger into a fire or garbage disposal. Even though most of us would never act on these impulses, in the very moment, the urge to stand up and leap feels alarmingly real. The thought was definitely there. What would it be like? How would it feel? While this feeling is more prevalent in people who suffer from anxiety, due in part to their tendency to operate in a higher alert mode, making them more hyper-aware of negative stimuli, it is not an indicator of suicidal tendencies or any other mental health condition, as long as it's not causing you lasting distress. It is, however, a feeling common enough that studies have been dedicated to it. In 2012, Jennifer Hames led a study at the Department of Psychology at Florida State University on the call of the void. She called it the high place phenomenon and ultimately said that the call of the void is potentially some kind of miscommunication of a basic human safety signal in our brain. Or in other words, the mind's weird and seemingly paradoxical way of appreciating life. The study samples a survey of 431 students with varying mental health backgrounds, asking them if they've experienced this phenomenon. At the same time, their mood behaviors, symptoms of depression, anxiety levels, and their levels of ideation were measured. A third of the study's participants reported that they had experienced the phenomenon. People with higher anxiety were more likely to have the urge, but also people with higher anxiety were more likely to have higher ideation. So people with higher ideation were more likely to report the phenomenon. A little over 50% of the subjects who said that they felt the call of the void never had suicidal tendencies. So what exactly is going on? Survival instincts. It all starts with our brain. Reddit user Travers in the thread TIL Call of the Void described it as, "Your brain is just doing a system test, making sure you decline the suggestion." A sort of alpha test for the most complex software in the universe. Our brain. The human brain functions on two levels, the conscious mind and the emotional mind. While the purpose of the emotional mind is to process our chemical and physical reactions to stimuli, the conscious mind contains all of the information we have gathered over our lifespan in the form of our learned memory, experience, and thought. Call of the Void is fascinating in that it occurs in situations where neither part of the brain has immediately recognized the potential dangers of the situation. The analogy Jennifer Hames gives in relation to the call of the void is that of a person walking near the edge of a roof. Your conscious mind looks at the edge of the roof and doesn't really register it as a threat. So your emotional mind, which has already subconsciously identified a threat, manifests this recognition of danger as a compulsion to move towards it, leap it, etc. This then allows your conscious mind to trigger survival tactics by sending a warning signal. This signal happens quickly and you instinctively back up, perhaps without realizing why. Your mind quickly rationalizes the situation. Why did I back away? I can't possibly fall. There's a railing there, so therefore I wanted to jump, quotes the study as the conclusion people come to. In other words, Since you lurched away, you mistakenly assume that the safety warning was actually a desire to jump. Essentially, your brain tells you to put your life at risk so that it can save you from yourself. But why does your brain go there? If you don't really want to die or harm yourself, why would you imagine jumping? That's where anxiety sensitivity may come in. Anxiety sensitivity often involves things like believing a pounding heartbeat indicates a heart attack, or that panic symptoms mean you may faint or even die. The authors found that people with higher anxiety sensitivity or fear of anxiety symptoms are more likely to experience the high place phenomenon because they are more likely to interpret a signal they don't understand as something dangerous. The study is flawed but interesting, with a major takeaway. Being the clear example, it demonstrates the notion that unusual and confusing thoughts don't actually indicate real risk and aren't also isolated. An alternative theory to the call of the void comes from David Wagner at Harvard University, who explained this with the example of the forbidden thought. Quite simply, it's that old game you play where you tell yourself, don't think about penguins, and suddenly all you can find yourself doing is thinking about penguins. Your brain is confused, and paradoxically, in order to stop thinking about penguins, you must think about penguins. On a larger scale, this applies to the call of the void, as you're constantly repressing thoughts of things that you shouldn't be doing, and every so often that impulse slips out and preoccupies your mind, whether for a passing moment or persistent minute. This acts solely as a sign that you know that doing it would be wrong. Numerous other theories have been examined as well, from the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. It's a moment of existentialist truth about the human freedom to choose to live or die. There is the vertigo of possibility, which means that you feel great power and comfort in knowing that you can choose to answer the call, but you don't. Instead, you choose to step back, choose to live and celebrate your life when your heart rate finally gets back to normal. There's also a purely human explanation, that the urge to sabotage ourselves is human. Even though there's no scientific, foolproof explanation for l'appel du vide, the call of the void, the fact that many theories and several studies have proved one thing: it's a shared sensation. These impulses can also be considered as intrusive thoughts. Unwanted thoughts that can pop up into our heads without warning at any time. They're often repetitive, with the same kind of thought cropping up again and again, and they can be disturbing or even distressing. They happen to most people from time to time. On their own, they generally aren't a cause for concern. However, it's important to keep in mind that the call of the void can seem a lot like suicidal ideation. If you experience suicidal thoughts, you may be more likely to experience the call of the void as well. Many people have thoughts of suicide without ever making a clear suicide plan or even having the intention to act on them. It's still best to talk to a professional if you do have thoughts of suicide, especially if they persist over time. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. We want you to be here. The human mind is a wonderful, intricate thing. The more we can learn about it, the better we can understand ourselves. And regardless of which explanation makes the most sense to you, rest assured that your brain is managing this sudden call in your best interest. If you found value and enjoyed watching, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos.